Thank you, Trish. We're delighted to have our advisor and friend Les Blomberg here with us today to talk about noise ordinances. So noise ordinances address just one niche in noise policy. They apply mostly to municipalities, sometimes counties, and sometimes states. But it's important to understand that there are areas that are covered by federal regulatory frameworks. For example, transportation noise, like rail, aviation, and vehicles, and workplace noise. So these are not the subject of noise ordinances that we're talking about today. As Trish mentioned, Les is the founder and executive director of the Noise Pollution Clearinghouse. That serves a vital role in archiving important publications about noise and its effects on health and society, and making these available to researchers and activists. He has also conducted research into noise and its effects, written extensively about noise for magazines, journals, and websites, and advised hundreds of communities, mayors, council members, zoning boards, and police chiefs about understanding and enforcing noise regulations. As many of you know or may have experienced, noise ordinances, it's a difficult subject and a broad subject. Noise is a complex phenomenon that is not well understood, either in terms of the breadth of its physical characteristics or their impacts on health and environment. Les is here today to frame the subject along the lines of the 1966 Western, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, starring Clint Eastwood. So as to not take anything away from him, I will let Les take it from here. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jamie. I'm happy to be able to talk with you today. And let me jump right in here. So basically, I did pick a movie theme to go with the talk today. It's The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. In that movie, if you've seen it, you'll know a couple things. Number one is they're introduced in reverse order. That as the movie begins, they start with the ugly, then the bad, and then the good. And that's the way I'm going to go here. I'm going to look at some ugly ordinances. I'm going to look at some bad ones, and then I'm going to look at some good ones. One of the main reasons I picked this theme and title was because in the 60s, the spaghetti westerns and the westerns like this, there was a lot of moral ambiguity. In the 50s, a western, the good guy was the good guy. He was clearly the good guy, and the bad guys were the bad guys. And, people ask me, what's a good noise ordinance? And I'm going, oh, there really isn't one. that there are things that make ordinances better. There are better ordinances, but that it's really difficult to say, here's the perfect ordinance. And so that was the other reason for choosing this, that I wanted to kind of bring to light that ambiguity that comes with noise regulation. And I think as I go through my presentation today, maybe that'll become clear. So let's start with the ugly. So, here's the thing about those spaghetti westerns. And in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, each of the characters kills 3 people before they are introduced. Printed on the screen, it goes the ugly after he kills 3 people. And the same with the good. So even the good is not really clearly good. And that's what happens with noise ordinances too. But there are a couple things in noise ordinances that are clearly pretty ugly and that you want to avoid. And these are slow meter response. And unfortunately, this talk is kind of boring and technical. But if it becomes too much, don't worry. Just go slow's bad, fast is good. That's all you have to take away. So sound level meters were invented 100 years ago right now, and they were invented in an analog era when you had a needle that moved back and forth. And that's how you measured noise. And you couldn't read the level on that needle because it was moving too fast. And so they slowed it down in the 30s and 40s. They slowed that needle down, and they called it slow meter response when they did that. And what they did is they averaged it over a second instead of having a short time period, like an eighth of a second, which is what fast is. And the thing is, we don't hear in chunks of seconds. And if you got kind of an impulsive noise, something like that, it's milliseconds, and so you're averaging in a lot of quiet time. So it's not a good metric, and it's left over from the Stone Ages, and at least in terms of noise meters, and so you don't really want that. Here's an example where just in the noise ordinance, this is the Berkeley, California noise ordinance. It just says slow response. You want the fast. Other things, anytime there's a time requirement in a noise ordinance, like you got to take a measurement for a certain amount of time, or as in this one, you have different levels for different amounts of time, then too, it becomes basically impossible to enforce. If you look at this, what's on your screen right now, you'll see that the officer has to be at the offending noise source for an hour to determine if there's a violation. Well, the first thing this becomes an intelligence test and not a noise test, because the first thing any noisemaker, any intelligent noisemaker will do as soon as the police show up is turn the noise down, and they will forever not be in violation, because the police will not be able to catch one because they've got to get 30 minutes of a violation. And so you basically give them time to come into compliance, and then as soon as they leave, it goes back up. The other problem is that police departments don't want to commit an hour to noise enforcement. Another metric that we often use is the LEQ, the average level. Again, this does the same thing. It requires a chunk of time. Anytime you have a chunk of time, you're not going to get the police officers to do that enforcement. The other thing that happens when an LEQ is used is that it becomes much more complicated to sort out the background noise from the noise of the source. And so anytime you see a noise ordinance with an LEQ in it, it's not really going to be easily enforced by a police officer. Another thing that you will see in noise ordinances is a requirement that they use type 1 sound level meters. Again, this all seems really technical, but once you delve into a noise ordinance, you'll see why this is important. Type 1 noise ordinances are more expensive, they're more accurate, but only by half a decibel or a decibel. And so the standard for enforcement is type 2. It keeps the community costs down significantly. Another thing that I think makes a noise ordinance ugly is if you just have a purely decibel-based ordinance. And, I think in the 1970s and so, there was this real hope that we would solve our noise problems with the sound level meter. But the sound level meter, and get away from things like nuisance regulation and reasonable or necessary or whatever other types of descriptions of noise a noise ordinance might have. And I think it's a laudable goal to have an objective standard. The problem is that, and you'll see that there aren't that many noise meters in our communities. And so if you have a purely decibel-based regulation, what you do is you basically make it a non-regulation. Police will then use other rules like disorderly conduct. They will not use the noise ordinance because they don't have a sound level meter. And that'll become clear a little bit later why that's true. And then there's another one, impulsive noise. A number of noise ordinances, this is from the state of New Jersey's noise ordinance, give an 80 decibel limit for impulsive noise. Again, this is a relic of the past. There used to be a setting, just like there's a slow setting on sound level meters, there's a fast, and there used to be an I or an impulse, which was a very short piece of time, a 35 millisecond piece of time that it averaged over. And that worked well for impulsive sounds, but it doesn't work well anymore, that level of 80 decibels, because we're not measuring them with that 35 milliseconds of time anymore. And so this is another kind of leftover ugly little element of our noise ordinances. So if you see any of these in a noise ordinance, you know you've probably got an ugly one. The bad is less technical, and it's easier to understand. The bad are noise ordinances that protect the noise polluter with high levels. Here's a perfect example of that. This is from the noise ordinance in Waco, Texas, 85 decibels. 85 decibels is what 85 decibels does is it's a license to pollute. It's not a noise level that is protective. I would say any level at 65 or above in a residential community, and during the day, and 60 or above in the night. If that's what you have in your regulations, you've got an ordinance that's more designed to protect the noise polluter than it is to protect the noise polluted. You can also protect the noise polluter with exemptions. And this one is just from a local one that I ran across just recently, but I've seen things like this in noise ordinances all the time. An exemption that just this one just gives businesses a blank check to do whatever they want in terms of noise. And so that's another way that you can protect the noise polluter. Now, how do we get to the good?
Hey, Les.
Yes.
Can I just, I think we have a question here that maybe pertains to the ugly. It's from James Johnson. He said, do L10 limits have the same enforcement problem as the duration limits?
Yes. L10 is basically what that table that I showed was with the different times. It's not an L10. I think that one uses an L7.5 and a L15, but an L10 is just the same type. It's an ordinance that requires time. They're okay in the planning process. I'm not that excited about them there either. But in the planning process, you've got usually noise experts, usually a venue where it's okay to use them. In noise regulation by a police department or a police officer, they're not going to be able to do that. It's just not going to work well at all. And if that person can hold on a little bit, I can finish answering that question in a little bit when I talk about how many police departments have sound level meters.
Okay, thank you.
That was a great question, though, Jamie. And thanks for jumping in there. And others, feel free to shoot Jamie questions because I don't mind being interrupted here. So, what do noise ordinances do? They protect the noise polluted, like we saw in that Waco, Texas one. They protect the noise polluter in that one. They protect the noise polluted. But most often they just do a little of both. And that's where most of our ordinances fall. And it's not noise ordinances usually take off the worst offenders. They usually don't provide levels of noise for which you and I would want to live if we were choosing our acoustic environment. But they provide a level that gets rid of the worst offenders is usually what happens. Things to remember also, one size doesn't fit all. That the noise level in our communities is very different. Some communities, urban residential communities, are going to be louder than a quiet suburban or a rural area. And that matters because a sound that, if a noise is 50 decibels and the background in your urban area is roughly 50 decibels, that's really different than if the sound is 50 decibels in your background in your quiet suburban or rural area is 20 or 25 decibels, because that could be like 4 times or more louder than the background, and it will just dominate the soundscape. And so, one size doesn't fit all. Also, you got to be careful of sacred cows. Every ordinance I read, that I've read, I swear has a sacred cow in it. I can read a noise ordinance and see who has the power in that community, because the sacred cow doesn't get regulated, and they get the exemptions. And so that's why it's hard to pick a noise ordinance and say, just go copy it, that ordinance, because in almost every community there are, powerful interests that, maybe it's the bar owners that have gotten exemptions for, outdoor music, or maybe, who knows what it is, but there is almost always lurking in a noise ordinance a sacred cow, and you should be on the lookout for those. And then finally here, point number 3, and this one's really important. Enforcement is probably more important than your noise ordinance. People will call me up and say, we need a new noise ordinance. And I go, well, let me see what your ordinance says. And I look at it and I go, well, what you really need is you just need some enforcement. That rarely is the noise, often the noise ordinance is the problem, but often it's the enforcement that's the problem. And I've got this little graphic here where I got good enforcement and bad enforcement on the top, a good ordinance and a bad ordinance on the left. And basically a good ordinance and good enforcement is great. It's green. I would much rather have good enforcement and a bad ordinance than a good ordinance and bad enforcement. And so I call that one, I labeled that one red, and then black is just, that's just bad and bad. So basically, don't forget enforcement. And I'm going to talk a fair bit about enforcement as we move through this a little bit here. Oh, sorry, there we go. So let's set the stage. Again, we're on a movie set here, but our set is instead of the Western, it's the police department, right? And typically, the police, about somewhere between 2% and 4% of calls to police departments are concerning noise. I've done a couple surveys. Some communities as high as 25% for a college town. Especially in the fall when all the students first come back. But it's roughly that. That equates to like 5 to 10 million calls to the police department a year. When I expand, if my estimates are right, I drew them from looking at about 100 communities, and then I extrapolated to the rest of the country because I don't have calls for service data for all the countries, the whole country. But it's a lot of noise ordinances, a lot of calls for noise. And to complicate that, most of those calls come in the evening and on the weekends and at night, evening and night and on the weekends. So we got a problem. How do we write a noise ordinance? So 5 million calls a year is 100,000 calls a week. So we got to write a noise ordinance that police can use 100,000 times a week. And that's a real problem because police officers can't run out with a sound level meter 100,000 times a week, especially if most of those calls are all at the same time and they're all on the weekend. Okay? And at the same time, we got to regulate this incredible range of noises from, air conditioners to amplified music to unmuffled cars to, businesses to, just chillers to on and on and on. And so it's really a challenge to write a good ordinance that does all of this.
Les, can I interrupt again?
Yeah.
So I don't know if you're going to get to this, but one question that came in was regarding frequency spectra. And for example, low frequency noise and accounting for that. So if you're going to talk to that specifically, feel
That's
free,
coming.
but if you want, okay.
That's coming. It's a slide. It's a couple slides away. So thank you for prompting that. It will be here shortly.
Okay, thank you.
So we got to do it quickly. We got to do it with little training. It's got to be with inexpensive equipment. But we also got to be able to regulate people with businesses and deep pockets. The problem is, if you really need a decibel level if your noise polluter is a business. The police just don't enforce a nuisance ordinance against businesses. I've just seen, I rarely see that happen. So let me tell you guys about how I write a noise ordinance. So I write a bunch of noise ordinances for communities. And I start with the EPA model noise ordinance. I have given a link to Jamie, and at the end of the presentation, they're going to send that link around so that everyone can find this. It's a wonderful little document. It was written in 1975, so it is outdated by only 50 years. But so what that means is you got to update it. And so that's what I do. I update it with respect to noises. I mean, the boombox was not invented in 1975. The leaf blower was not really around in 1975. There's a whole bunch of stuff that needs to be updated. And there are regulatory tools that are regularly used now that weren't in that, like the plainly audible standard and DBC and low frequency noise standards. And so that's what I add. I add a bunch of regulatory tools, and then again, the final thing I do is I try to match the noise ordinance to the community. That if you're talking about a suburban community, I'm going to adjust noise levels downward a little bit, and that'll become clear in a second here as I talk about the different parts of a noise ordinance. I told you that there's a bunch of regulatory tools. I did a study of the 500 largest cities in the country and their noise ordinances, and these are the regulatory tools that I found and their prevalence, and it's quite interesting. The most common one is disturbing the peace, just the criminal, breach of peace, disturbing the peace. Lots of communities use that for noise enforcement. There's also the next. I find operational restrictions in noise ordinances, 97% of them. That'd be time of day, day of week, stuff like that, setbacks. The next most common is a nuisance standard within the noise ordinance, where the disturbing the peace is outside of the noise ordinance. That's why I put it in parentheses at the top. This is the most common way a noise ordinance is started, is you can't make an unreasonable noise, 88% of them. The next most common tool is the plainly audible standard, that you can't hear a noise at a certain distance or at a certain location. That's in 65% of the ordinances. Interestingly, these are the 500 largest cities in America, but still only 59% of them have a decibel level in them. And then there are equipment requirements like muffler requirements, and then quiet zones. There are a number of advantages and disadvantages of these regulatory tools. And this graphic you won't be able to see, but don't worry, because this too will be in a link that's sent to you. Just to show you, can you see my cursor move up here? Yes? Okay. So this, along the top are the advantages. Down the left-hand side are the regulatory tools. Again, you don't have to see these because you can look at this entire document in your email shortly. But I do want to point out a couple things. A couple of the advantages. This one's ease of use. This one is comprehensive. You can use it on all noise sources. This one here is quantitative. That gives you a decibel level, basically, or an objective standard. Other legal considerations that are important, and then just its prevalence. And here are the two, disturbing the peace and nuisance at the top. Here are the decibel. Here it's a plainly audible. And here are my, kind of like operational restrictions, stuff like that. A couple things to note is what's missing. Obviously, the nuisance and the disturbing the peace standards are not very good in terms of enforcing against, or their advantage is not that they're qualitative or good in court. The problem with the decibel is that it's not very easy to use. And you can look at all the different criteria that I assess it by when you look at the document. And finally, the problem with all of the other ones is that they're not comprehensive. They deal with a specific noise, and that's it. And so piecing together a good noise ordinance is really difficult. It takes a lot of knowledge and skill to do it, because you have to piece together all of these tools, provide the police officers all of them, and train them to use the tool that is best suited to the problem that they encounter. Here's that low frequency question. I said that I update it. I update it with, I usually update it with DBC. It was not very common, but it's becoming increasingly more common. I also, in some cases, use an octave band, but that's actually kind of falling out because an octave band is complicated, really requires a noise expert, and it's just more complicated. It's not my first choice. And then, of course, plainly audible is another way to address low frequency, especially if you make it plainly audible within a home, because homes filter out all the high frequency noise, but low frequency noise goes through a home. So if you make plainly audible in a home a criteria, then you have a low frequency standard for your community. I realized I've hit my time limit, so let me move quickly here through the parts of a noise ordinance. I'm only going to talk about 3 of these, but noise ordinances follow the same general pattern. They have a purpose or intent. They have definitions. They have general prohibitions, specific prohibitions, exemptions, usually motor vehicles thrown in there. They've got to have some penalties, and then severability clause, basically saying that if any part of this is found to be unconstitutional, the rest of it is still good. So let's just look at 3 of those, and we're going to start off with general prohibitions. And this is a common general prohibition. It's that nuisance clause. This is from the EPA model noise ordinance that I read. It's just I apologize that it's not the best image, but you know what? When you look at it, you'll see that the one you got sent in your email is not the best image either, because it's a 50-year-old document and it looks like it. But this the standard basically says you don't make unreasonable noise, and it defines it as a noise that annoys, disturbs a reasonable person of normal sensitivities. That's the general definition. There we go, right there. The other aspect of the general prohibitions is the decibel levels. And this too is straight out of the EPA level. It says no person shall operate, that exceeds the levels in this table. And here's the table. Now, the EPA noise ordinance did not give you any levels, however. and probably a good that they didn't, because one size doesn't fit all. You can't just put a level in for one community. You can't put a level in for New York and have it work for a suburban or a rural community. It's just not appropriate. But they did have another thing in there, and I'm going to talk just next about what the decibel level should be. But really quickly, there's also a correction to those levels for pure tone and impulsive noise. Remember I said I didn't like that impulsive at 80? Well, this is why. It's because the EPA is recommending that you have a penalty for impulsive noise, because impulsive noise attracts our attention. It has a rapid onset, a rapid decay, usually less than a second, and that type of noise really grabs our attention. And so they gave a penalty. They didn't specify amount. I usually specify 5 to 10 decibels, usually 5. Oops. So now, how do we pick a level? The way I do it is I go with the mean, the median, and the mode. This is, again, from that EPA document. On the vertical axis here, you have the number of communities with a noise ordinance at that decibel level. And around the bottom here is the decibel level. This one here is the 55 decibel line. This is the 60. This is the 50. Again, I realize it's not very easy to read, but you know what? This is in your email. You can go grab this and look at it. And you can, or if you're watching this later, you can just search for the EPA model noise ordinance. You'll find this right in there. You'll find that the most common level for daytime circle, nighttime is a square. So the most common level for a daytime in noise ordinances in the United States, the EPA found, was 55 decibels. If you look over here, you can't read it on this screen, but it's the average level was like 56. So it's pretty close to the mean too. And the median value is also 55. And so that's a great place to start. The mean, the median mode for urban residential areas. So this is a urban residential. This is a town with 100,000 people or more. It's probably the best place for this would be a between the wars neighborhood, right? Between World War I and World War II, maybe just slightly before World War I neighborhood. This would be an urban residential neighborhood like that you would set these levels at. If you're setting them for a suburban or a rural area, you might bring it down a little bit. For the nighttime, you see the most common level. Again, the mean, the median, and the mode is really at 50. So I start with 55 during the day, 50 at night as my starting place, and then I adjust for the community and for the community's interests. If a community really wants to be quieter, then I can move down from those levels. There isn't a lot of move down level because basically a 10 decibel difference is a doubling or halving of the loudness. And so it gets more compressed the more you move down, but you can move down a little. Basically, in that document, you'll find commercial and industrial or manufacturing levels too. Basically, you just add 5 and add 10 to your residential levels. Again, I adjust for the nature of the neighborhood. I also add a DBC and an interior level. And I'm going to skip this in the interest of time. But I just want to end with one thought here. The problem with the nuisance language, again, the nuisance language is don't make an unreasonable noise. Well, the problem with that is that the police don't use that type of an ordinance against a business. The problem with a decibel-based ordinance is that police don't have sound level meters. And they don't have the training to use them. I did a study. When I did that study of the 500 largest cities, I got that list of all the cities that had a noise ordinance that had decibels in it. I randomly selected 20 and I called all 20 and asked them, do you have a noise meter? These were towns that had a decibel-based ordinance. And not a single one of those 20 did. None. So then what I did is I actually expanded it to a group of 70. And I started calling communities that I knew had noise meters, because I was learning nothing except for I already learned what I wanted to. Of them, when I called the dispatcher, often I would get, nobody around here knows anything about a sound level meter. So they don't know. I got a bunch of definite no's. I got some, I don't know. And I got a couple that I think we do, which is really reassuring. I did find 5 where they did, 5 with meters. Only 4 of them, however, had a calibrator. You need a calibrator if you're going to use a sound level meter. And you need to have it recertified by the lab every year or 2. And only 3 of those have actually done that. And so basically, they really don't. And the one city, I called a city I think it was out in Oregon where they have a noise enforcement officer. And that noise enforcement officer did 57 enforcements that year with the noise meter. Everything else, the other thousands of calls to the police department were handled by the police department under the public disturbance or the noise disturbance clause. And so really the sound level meter is the tool of last resort in police departments. And often the tool that doesn't exist in the toolbox, even though it might be in the noise ordinance. I gotta say, the reason I like noise cameras is that the problem with the decibel level has been the noise enforcement has been like the problem since the 70s. It's how to do the noise enforcement. Noise cameras, I think, are going to revolutionize noise enforcement. However, I strongly recommend that you don't go out and advocate for one yet. I am waiting for New York City and the other big cities that are doing this to get sued a bunch of times and win a bunch of victories. I just talked to one of the manufacturers of these who just sold it to a small town in Iowa, and I'm going, that was stupid. Because, what better town to sue than a town that doesn't have the resources to defend it in court really well? And so I am not writing noise cameras into my noise ordinances yet because I want to get a few good cases under having been fought by Boston or New York or Miami or Chicago or whoever wants to take that on, because those communities have the resources to do it instead of a small little town. So even though I think these are great, I exercise caution with noise cameras right now. I think that's going to change quickly, but and then the next part is the specific prohibitions. This is where you throw all the small little things, they're not small, they're big noise sources, but you just treat them individually and you throw them into the specific prohibitions. And the penalties, I'll just mention briefly. There are a number of ways to incentivize. Normally, when I write noise ordinance, I try to make it a civil penalty, at least first. A lot of places have criminal penalties. I don't think that you should criminalize noise, at least not at the first offense. I don't have any problem with criminalizing it later. I don't have any problem with criminalizing it for the first offense either. It's just that it seems like everything's a little easier if you just do it civil to begin with and then make it a criminal penalty. But a couple things I really do like is cease and desist orders, noise abatement orders. Again, that was in the EPA model noise ordinance, where the police can order that they stop, and you can impound or seal the device in many cases, and that's what you need against a big, somebody with a lot of resources or a repeat offender. It's like, if you impound their motorcycle, that's their baby, and that will get their attention, and they will put a muffler on it because you just put their baby on a trailer and hauled it away. So there are other ways than just money to attract the attention of the noisemakers. And that's it. Here's a link to that EPA model noise ordinance, but it's also in your email. And sorry I was a little over, but hopefully you get a few more questions in now.
Jamie, you're on mute.
And my internet connection is not stable, so I'm just, So thank you, Les. That was great. We do have a bunch of questions. I'm going to apologize in advance if we can't get to all of them, but let's start with one that says, are there locations that enable citizens to monitor and file complaints without calling the, quote, noise police?
There are communities that allow people to file complaints, but you're talking about a nuisance lawsuit, really. If If you're not going to use the police to solve the problem, you're talking about suing that noisemaker, really.
So that's one of the beauties, of course, of noise cameras. If they come with, software that enables also the complaint, something to be sent out and a fine and so forth.
Yep.
Okay, let's see. Yeah, modified mufflers come up, leaf blowers, loud motorcycles. One thing is, if vehicle noise falls under federal regulations, does that include the supermax volumes that car stereos can make?
No. So, to be clear, the communities are prohibited from writing standards for vehicle noise that are more restrictive than the EPA standards for trucks or motorcycles. There are no standards from the EPA regarding cars. So the cars are fair game, number one. With respect to vehicle noise, you can also regulate the manner of operation. So the standard for trucks and motorcycles is 80 decibels at 50 feet. That doesn't mean that you have to choose that as your level, however, because you can regulate the manner of use of these things, and so you can pick a lower level than that if you wish. With respect to car stereo systems, there is no standard for that, and the most common way car vehicle systems are addressed in this country is with the plainly audible standard that you shall not hear the noise of that vehicle at 50 feet or 100 feet, sometimes a different level during the day or the night, with the unaided hearing of unaided hearing with a person of with normal hearing abilities. And so what you do is the officer just stands there and listens, and if they can hear the amplified bass speed of a car system, and they know they're more than 50 feet away or 100 feet away or whatever the ordinance says, then they're in violation. There's a good reason for that. If there's a safety reason for that, in addition to the noise reason for that. If you can hear them 100 feet away, the noise inside the car is going to mask emergency signaling devices like sirens, and so police sirens, fire sirens, ambulance sirens. It's people. The driver of a vehicle with that will not have adequate time to respond to an emergency vehicle. And so there is both a public safety and a noise reason to adopt that ordinance.
Thanks, Les. I apologize if you already spoke about this, but the problem of modified mufflers, motorcycle noise, modified car vehicle noise, truck noise, has become huge. And we have a Quiet Streets program, Quiet Communities does that. We're becoming active. We had an event several months ago. Maybe Trish, you could put a link into that event so people can hear that, but we'll be doing more in that area as well. Les, I don't know if you want to talk about any of the federal or state laws, but there's clearly these are illegal and the parts are illegal. The question is, how do you get enforcement?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I hate to say that. Part of that answer is I think we're going to have to be patient, because the noise camera is going to do it for us. But I don't think we should jump on it quite yet. I think we should jump on it in the places that have the resources. So if you've got a town or a city that says, yeah, we'll defend this to the max in court, then go for it. But if you've got a community that's trying to do a noise ordinance on the cheap, that's not a good choice for a place for this noise camera right now. However, the motorcycles are easy to at least get the worst offenders, and that is to adopt the EPA stamp requirement. And lots of communities have. Boston has, Denver has. If you read Boston's, I wrote that one about 15 or 20 years ago. Go check that one out. That's a good one. And that's a perfect example of what happens. You write one of these, and guess what happens? The American Motorcycle Association or whatever immediately sued Boston. And you know what, they won because they were going to win, because all they did is adopt a federal regulation. But you know what? You don't need, if you're a small town, you don't need to be sued by them right away. So it's best to wait a little bit and let Boston and New York absorb those blows. But you can also regulate them with decibel levels on the side of the road. But again, it's expensive and time consuming.
Thank you. So with regard to different community settings, Rebecca Cutting has a question. Have you seen any ordinances that take urban background noise into account, like
Sure.
highway, airport, train, manufacturing, to set levels?
Yes. So first of all, almost every ordinance already does take background levels into account to some extent, because usually they set the limits based on the noise levels in the communities. That said, there are some communities that use an above ambient level, some that use a exact level. Again, I didn't throw the above ambient into the ugly, although I could have, and I thought about it. Because there are some good uses of above ambient standards, like 10 decibels above ambient. The problem is, how do you measure that? And it's something that police aren't going to do very well. So I don't like them. There's some communities that say, well, you know, if your noise ordinance is 50, but your background is 55, we give you up to 55. I don't like that at all. That's another ugly. That, you know, if your noise ordinance is 50 and at night, let's say, and the background is 55 because you've got 3 or 4 different noise sources all combining, all meeting that 50 decibel ordinance, and then bringing the level up to 55. Now the next person comes in and says, well, you know, it's the level's 55 and not 50, so now I can be 55. And so then they put theirs in, and now the level's 58. So above ambient is a way to grow your noise limit up and up and up. And so I really don't like them for that. I do like them in just a little bit in if they're used in conjunction with an absolute limit. Like if it's quiet time, then yeah, then you can't be 10 decibels over the background. But you still can't go above 55 during the day and 50 at night. That is an okay use of ambient. But otherwise, so I kind of, it was too nuanced to describe in a short time. So I left it out of the ugly.
There's a few questions here regarding, I think, gas leaf blowers. And let's see. This one, our town meeting was packed by landscapers and supporters who had never attended before due to a petition and sign campaign. As a result, the meeting, the recently meeting approved ban on gas powered leaf blowers was repealed because it was packed with the landscapers who were against it. Many of the citizens have tinnitus, hyperacusis, autisms, and so on. People have a right to accommodations that prevent harmful noise. What strategies are left if town meeting is packed and votes to repeal the ban?
Yeah,
that's not the exact wording, but I tried to.
I got it.
Put it in words to really understand what's going on.
We face this all the time. That people who are looking for a quiet environment, there are a number of people that are really committed, but there are a lot of people that will say, "Yeah, I support that," and such. But the noisemakers are incredibly committed. If you try to pass a motorcycle stamp regulation and you let the word out too soon, you will get every motorcyclist in the city at your city hall, right? Because they don't want to be regulated. And they will come out because they just spent, a couple $100 to have somebody remove their muffler and put on straight pipes. And so they are really committed, and part of their identity is that vroom vroom that they get when they hit the gas. And so we are always faced with a more committed opposition. Our support is very broad, but it's not very deep. Theirs is pretty narrow, but it's very deep. And the solution is organization. You've got to anticipate that is going to anticipate that what you described is going to happen, and bring out the numbers and have the petition of the couple thousand people that want this regulation, so that when 100 motorcyclists or 100 landscapers show up at a meeting, you still got 5,000 signatures saying that we want it. And it's really an organizing thing. You got to anticipate that you are going to get swamped, because they are very deep and narrow, their support, and we are very broad and shallow. And so you've got to work around that.
Thank you. Barbara Katzenberg is curious about day limits for noisy construction activity. You can only do I guess I don't know if I'm reading this correctly. She said you can only do any kind of ledge work for 15 days in a 180-day period for a particular parcel. It basically says you can never make construction quiet enough. So do you simply limit how long you can do it for?
So construction noise is really difficult to regulate. Famously, the two places that have famously tried this are Boston with the Big Dig and New York City. And it's very complicated. The problem, like what this, when I think when the person's describing ledge work, I think they're talking about, using a drill, basically a huge jackhammer to break up the ledge and rock on a property. And it's like, this impulsive noise that can go on for a long time. It turns the yard into a quarry, basically. And most noise regulations of construction just limit it to the time of day. That you just got to do it during the daytime hours, and don't set a limit on that. It's rare that isn't enough, but in those cases, it's just hell on the neighbors. And it's you could write a good noise ordinance about that, but I don't think anybody's going to adopt it. By the time they adopt it, the problem is gone. And so I don't see a really good solution except for trying to write as good a construction noise ordinance as possible initially.
From Mark Sandine, I'm interested in how many bylaws specify who is responsible for enforcement and recommended alternatives to having the police do enforcement. There are concerns about requiring a neighbor to call the police on their neighbor. It tends to suppress noise reports or complaints, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, and I've seen, police departments that don't want to do a noise enforcement. What they do is they go over to the neighbor that called first, so that the people who are getting served know who did it. And that's a sure way to stop noise enforcement. If you've got a more responsible police department, they won't say who did it. They're just saying, your neighbors called, and, they don't say which one. It's a problem. And, to me, noise is a test of your ability to live in a community. And unfortunately, a lot of people fail that test. And, there really isn't, I mean, you need the power of the state to shut it down. And so that is the police department. Some places use health departments, but the health departments really only come out in, they're the ones with the sound level meters that come out with the businesses. And they're only in, they're often county health departments, and they're often in large areas. Small towns don't have health departments really. So I think you are stuck with the police. I would start by, I always tell people before you call the police, if this is a repeat offender, I don't just call the police when they're making it. I go to the police department, talk to the police chief, talk to the person on the supervisor on staff at night when this happens, and tell them what's happening and get them sympathetic to you and find out how best to solve the problem. Just calling the police often doesn't work well, especially if it's a long-term problem. Think strategically. Call a city council member. Ask them to go to the police department with you to do this, so that you do your homework ahead of time. You can't just count on police departments to solve it. Often they do, but if they don't and they out you, it can really be bad for you. And so I think, if this is a long-term problem, don't just go, I've had enough, I'm calling the police. Go, I've had enough. I'm calling my city council member, and I'm calling the police chief. I'm calling the supervisor. I'm going to tell them my problem. I'm going to tell them how long it's been going on. I'm going to document it, and I'm going to say, next time this happens, what should I do, and what will you do? So you know what they're going to do, and know ahead of time. And it's really a matter of doing that homework, unfortunately, if you want to protect yourself and if you want to get good results.
So thank you, Les. And I know we're at it's 5:01, so we're a minute over. And I'm going to just apologize. I know that there's a lot of open questions. We haven't been able to get to all of them, but we will have them, a record of them, and we will try and get them answered as best we can. And thank you for your comments. I did want to bring up one, though, that's a little different. And it's asking if every city had a noise enforcement officer, would the fines pay for, it says her salary, but I guess, do the fines pay for the salary of the noise enforcement officers?
That is a great question, because what is the difference between speeding tickets and noise enforcement? It's the revenue stream. We really don't have a revenue stream with noise enforcement. Typically, noise enforcement involves the police officer going out and saying, turn the volume down. Most people turn it down. They come into compliance. That's it. There's no money. There's no revenue stream. I don't think that's going to change. Where it's going to change is the noise camera. The noise camera is going to give us a revenue stream. It's not going to, and it may allow us to hire somebody who then can go out and make those other measurements. So I'm really excited by the noise camera, because it solves two problems of noise enforcement. One is it solves just how to do an enforcement with a sound level meter, because it costs too much time and money. And it solves the revenue stream problem that has dogged noise policy for 50 years. And it creates a revenue stream. And that's why I love these things. They're going to be great. We just got to give them a little time.
And we will be having programs on noise cameras, so stay tuned. Les, thank you so much. I'm going to let Trish wind up here, and we hope to see you at a future event again.
Quiet communities.